Just like to say thank you everyone for coming along to our session rather than going to the pub. We've got an hour here this evening, and today's topic is going to be around building smarter farm assurance from review to reality. And I guess the context for this is it's roughly 12 months since the UK Farm Assurance Review was released. And today's a really good chance to talk around sort of how technology kind of is and will continue to support the recommendations from that sort of going forwards with farm assurance. We're very pleased to have three excellent speakers here today. I'm going to give a quick introduction to each one of them, and then I'll just go through the format for the next hour. So we've got Philippa Wiltshire, who's Director of Standards and Operations at Red Tractor. Philippa is a farmer's daughter with over 30 years of agribusiness experience and is leading expert in the whole chain assurance. She has held leadership roles at Fabble and Assured British Meat and has been involved with Red Tractor since its launch in 2000. As Director of Standards and Operations, Philippa ensures standards meet stakeholder needs and that the scheme operates efficiently for members by leveraging technology and minimising audit burden. Philippa leads industry collaboration and has recently headed Red Tractor's response to this UK Farm Assurance Review. Philippa will be followed by Phil Pearson, Development Director of APS Group. Phil leads innovation at APS Group, the UK's largest supplier of British tomatoes with 70 hectares of glasshouses. His work to date has seen him drive advances in combined heat and power, ground source cooling, vertical farming, robotics and anaerobic digestion to improve sustainability. As Fellow of the Institute of Horticulture and Chair of the British Tomato Growers Association Technical Committee, Phil has helped implement new technologies across the industry. He works closely with DEFRA and other government bodies to promote innovation and address sector challenges and collaborates with research funders on projects such as harvesting robotics for soft fruit and tomatoes. And then Phil will be followed by David Christensen from Kingston Hill Farm Limited, just up the road from here, and is an Arla farmer. David runs the farm, a family-owned dairy and beef business, farming around 2,000 acres, milking 950 cows. David graduated from Newcastle University and then gained some experience in New Zealand before joining the family farm back here. David has held leadership roles as Chairman of the Maize Growers Association, Director of the Orion Farming Group, and Board Member for Arla. He chairs the NFU Mutual South East Regional Advisory Board and was appointed to the board of Wednesday plc in 2025. He is also trustee of the Oxfordshire Agriculture Society Trust, supporting young people in agriculture. So we're very pleased to have all three speakers here today. So what we're going to do is I'm going to give a quick sort of just recap and context to set the scene before we go into listening to each of our speakers. They will do their presentations, and then we're hoping to leave a good sort of 15-20 minutes at the end for a bit of discussion and Q&A. So we won't ask questions after each speaker, just so I'm conscious of time. We've only got an hour to keep things moving, but we'll make sure there's plenty of time at the end for you to ask questions to any of the speakers or to the group as a whole. So, just to get started, I guess a quick recap, and for those in the room that aren't so familiar with the UK Farm Assurance Review, it was released last January, so I said about 12 months ago. It was commissioned sort of through the farming unions and by AHDB. And I guess the aim of it really was to look at the whole farm assurance process, and it's not just Red Tractor specific, it's sort of general farm assurance, and sort of see how it delivers value to the different stakeholders, such as farmers and the supply chain and consumers, and effectively make sort of recommendations for how it could be improved going forwards. Within the report, it was a 190-page report, so quite extensive in terms of covering all different aspects of farm assurance. There were 9 strategic recommendations, and the one we're going to focus really on today is the second one of those strategic recommendations, which, as you can see on the screen there, a transformational step forward in embracing technology and managing data to deliver more effective farm assurance with greater added value for all. And sort of just digging down a bit deeper into some of the findings within sort of that strategic recommendation, and there's a few on the screen there, but it touched on areas such as, farm assurance bodies having flexible, user-friendly portals, sort of a bit of a principle of only giving information once and how that information can be reused rather than having to upload multiple documents and multiple bits of evidence to different schemes that are requesting it, because we're all very conscious of obviously the burden on farms in providing information and providing evidence for these kind of schemes. It had sort of touched on a bit around sort of data ownership and data control, so the principles of farmers being in control as to their data and their information, who can see it and how it's being used, but also how it could be reshared as well. So touching on that sort of tell us once principle, how might the same evidence be used for multiple schemes if the farmer's taking part in different kind of schemes? It talked a bit around sort of the need to invest in digital skills at a farm level, and sort of, if we're wanting to adopt this technology, how do we support the industry in moving and changing practices to using some of the new tools that might come around in the future. And it talked a lot around sort of, some of the collaboration and investment that might be needed on that as well. Not just investment in some terms of skills at a farm level, but also the technology from the certification bodies or the farm assurance bodies to make sure that their, technology portals are equipped for the future of how farm assurance might evolve. And then the final bit there in the bottom right corner, sort of talking around dynamic assurance. So obviously, we're familiar with how traditional farm assurance has worked, but how might that change in the future? If there's more information and data that can be shared digitally, is there a need to do farm assurance exactly the way we have in the past, with visits and a huge amount of documents and evidence being shared? So there's a lot of detail in there, and I'm going to pass over to Philippa now, who will be able to go into a bit more detail about some of the work going on at Red Tractor on the back of that.
Great, thanks very much, Rob. I haven't touched anything. Okay, hopefully you can all hear me and see the slides and everything. So delighted to come here today, talk about this. As Rob said, it's a year since the Farm Assurance Review was published, and to really talk about, I suppose, Red Tractor's learnings and I suppose aspirations and some of the things that we should be looking at in the future in terms of taking farm assurance through to the future. Just very quickly, just an overview really of Red Tractor. So I think all of you, most of you will be aware of who Red Tractor are. We're obviously the UK's largest farm assurance scheme, and actually been independently verified as a world leader in assurance. And I would say that the UK needs to be congratulated for setting up farm assurance in the 1990s. We were definitely the first nation that sort of thought up the idea and really grasped it. So our purpose is to develop standards for British food that everyone can trust. And I think the key things I just want to emphasise here is that Red Tractor is extremely large scale. So we have over 40,000 farms that are in Red Tractor, all British, and we cover 6 different sectors. So that's pigs, poultry, beef and lamb, fresh produce, crops and dairy. So we're not niche at all, we are large scale, and with the large scale comes a lot of benefits, but also some significant challenges as well, and particularly when you're looking cross sector, and we might come into some of that. But really our purpose as Farm Assurance and as Red Tractor has always been to try and reduce duplication, reduce audit burden, single set of standards, single audit, one-stop shop that everyone can trust and buy into. So that was always the purpose of Farm Assurance and the purpose of Red Tractor. So that's just an introduction there. I just want to talk just very briefly about the traditional approach, because of course Farm Assurance has been in place now for 30 years. When it was set up, it was very new. And because it was very new, the way the standards were written at the time, and I suppose the legacy that we have got with Farm Assurance, is that they were very much input focused. It was more, do this, do that. And they were written and are written by technical experts who know that those are the ways in which you can then deliver the outcomes that we're looking for. So deliver food safe food. So if you do these things, then the outcome is that. And I'll take the example of, back 30 years ago, 25% of our beef and sheep farmers didn't even have a medicine record. And therefore farm assurance was, this is a medicine record, this is what you need to do, and that will deliver safe food. So it's important to understand that as the context of where we've come from and why, as to where we are and how we need to change going forward. So they've always been traditionally task-focused, input-focused standards, and we've always had a in-person assessment going on the farm to verify compliance against those standards at a fixed frequency. So for most sectors it's annually, for the extensive livestock sectors of dairy and beef and lamb it's been every 18 months. And that's the same for every single farm, every single member, and the audit checks compliance against every standard. And in this country, we've always operated our assurance schemes to ISO accredited and with independent certification bodies. That's really important. It's an internationally recognised standard. It gives the assurance scheme credibility in the eyes of the customers. But as I said, it's also globally recognised. So it is important for trade as well, and benchmarking and earned recognition with regulators. It is a very simple model. So although we are very large scale, because it is a simple model, you have a lot of cost efficiencies. Every single farm renews at the same time. The admin processes through the certification bodies are very simple. And I just want to make that point because when we start talking about options for the future, we do need to keep our eye on the cost model around it, and that we don't introduce something that is so complicated and that every farm is treated differently that we end up sort of sleepwalking into a cost model that's going to be incredibly expensive. So that's why I just wanted to make that point. So what's our digital journey? So our digital journey did not start with the Farm Assurance Review a year ago. Our digital journey, and we have evolved farm assurance over the years, but probably a key point was in 2019 when we recognised and realised that we needed some way of improving the efficiency for farmers to be able to demonstrate compliance, particularly through records. And this idea of an online filing cabinet where farms could upload records in advance of an inspection and an inspector could look at that. And so in 2019 we went out for tender and we partnership with Map of Ag to develop that online filing cabinet. Now, some might think we had a bit of foresight, but actually what it meant was that although it was in the testing stages when COVID hit, we actually turned it around and launched it in 3 weeks and went live, which meant as a UK industry, we were able to continue to reassure and demonstrate to the supply chain, even during a pandemic and a crisis, that standards were still being maintained throughout our whole food supply chain. So that did seriously kickstart the use of the portal because actually that was the way in which farmers were able to demonstrate and upload not just documents but photos, and also we had remote auditing and live streaming. So that was a lot of learnings very, very quickly with that. And we've gradually, after about 12 months, 18 months, gradually worked back to physical assessments. Admittedly, there are a lot of farms that actually much prefer physical assessments and having somebody coming down the drive. But the portal has continued to be used by farmers. So we've continually got that use of the portal. We continue to get that feedback about how we can improve it. In terms of using technology, some of the other milestones that we've had, and I've just put some examples on here. In 2023, we introduced a new inspection cycle for the poultry sector. Obviously, with avian influenza affecting the poultry sector and biosecurity, we knew as a poultry industry that we were faced with what was going to be very short windows for traditional physical inspections. And actually, could we find a way of continuing to have that oversight and that robust oversight of verification of compliance, but in a more practical way that took into account the fact that actually the industry was probably going to be locked down for 6 months of the year. And that is a mixture of physical and remote assessment through a 2-year inspection cycle, a 2-year window. And then another example of where we have worked together with others in the supply chain to reduce the audit burden is the work that we've done with the Tesco Sustainable Dairy Group, who prior to this were having additional audits, separate inspectors, but by working in partnership with them, we were able to offer their farmers the ability to be able to use our portal, to be able to upload records that they needed to for that customer, all very secure, and also for the auditor to be able to do the additional audits at the same time. And David might want to mention that because he's in part of that group. And then, as Rob has said, the Farm Assurance Review recommendations were launched a year ago and focus on technology. The first thing just to say is that not all the actions in the assurance scheme, in the assurance review, are for red tractor and assurance schemes. So there were some really challenging areas in that Farm Assurance Review for the wider industry as well, including AHDB, the National Farmers Union, and the whole supply chain. But I think, and certainly from a red tractor perspective, we've absolutely welcomed the farm assurance review. For us, we think it's come up with a lot of very valid suggestions. We've been working very hard on that. We want to deliver tangible change to farmers, to our members and the supply chain. We need to address duplication and audit burden, and we have a lot of work streams going on in all the areas around that, and we've been very transparent about what we've been doing, publishing reports every 2 months in terms of the progress that we're making. And just last month, we launched our sector strategies, written very much in collaboration with our sector boards and the entire supply chain in terms of looking and announcing that we're entering a review of standards. But to deliver all of the things that we need to deliver for an efficient farm assurance landscape over the next 5 to 10 years, it's not just one work stream that's going to do that. It's a whole series of work streams, including the technology one. And as Louise said this morning, Louise Manning said this morning, change means continuous improvement. And that, if I look back over what Red Tractor looked like 10 years ago or what it looked like 20 years ago, it has continuously improved. But I think we're looking forward. We have got to really think outside the box as an industry over the next 5 years in terms of change and making it relevant. So what we've done is we've transitioned that online filing cabinet, and what we're transitioning it to is more as an efficiency tool for farmers and for assessors. And actually we have a lot of really good feedback from farmers who are using it 12 months of the year. They're not using it just for the week before the inspection. Some are, don't get me wrong, some are, but we've got others who are really using it all year round, and that's where they're starting to see the benefit, because actually when the inspector comes, it's already part of the work. I mentioned assessors. Farmers are absolutely vital. Of course, the system's got to work for farmers, but it also has to work for assessors. And the feedback, we have had feedback that I've used the portal, but the assessor didn't want to. So we have focused quite a bit in the last year as well about improving that functionality for the assessors as well. Things like, and for farmers, things like if you upload a record that's a certificate that expires in 3 years' time, allowing the farmer to write a reminder that allows him, so he knows that I don't actually have to do anything for another 3 years. I think we've got some really exciting things that we're going to be announcing in the next few months in terms of changes that will be live on the system. One of which, and a lot of feedback from the industry around the ability to be able to take photos and use photos as their due diligence record instead of a record. So let me give you the example. Arable farmer, due diligence record, I've cleaned my combine, or I've cleaned out my grain store. And the due diligence record that you see, actually take a photo while you're doing it, upload it to the record. You don't have to fill in a form. That is coming, and that is coming in the very quickly. We're just doing the user guides on how that works. And also ranking high impact documents. So one of the things we find is that farmers say brilliant, and they upload absolutely everything. And with farming businesses, obviously there is a lot of paperwork. So giving more guidance on if you're going to do anything, these are the really important documents that will have more of an impact on audit burden, so that we can do that. Also, just bearing in mind as well, as I said, the sectors that we cover, actually we have different types of farming businesses within assurance, and particularly if we look at the integrated sectors, pigs and poultry, where you've got integrated businesses who within their businesses have got 100, 150 farms, where they might have a lot of common paperwork. We need to make sure that the portal's got that functionality, and we're doing pilots around that area as well. And then also looking at this idea of potential data integration. Rather than the farmer having to upload the data, is that information not available from somewhere else as well, albeit with the farmer's permission? Let me stress that time and time again, albeit with the farmer's permission. There are some challenges around that, and I'll talk about that. In terms of the learnings and the challenges, as I said before, farmers are absolutely vitally important. They are the customer, but actually one of the learnings is we mustn't forget the assessors as well. It needs to work for all parties involved. Variations in connectivity, I mean, I'm sure I don't have to tell all of you, you know, it is the challenge. It came up today as well, in that there are variations in technology. So when we launch the photo option, there will be some farmers that becomes a bit of a challenge for, because they haven't necessarily got the connectivity. And also the differences by sector, the volume of paperwork differences by sector. I'm sure Phil's going to talk about his sector in terms of fresh produce. It is huge. But also technical ability as well. So I think what's really important for us as a scheme, and the Farm Assurance Review did make a recommendation that portals were mandatory. We did not agree with that, because we do believe that we need to provide a system that is accessible by all, and there will be some who still want to use the traditional route and still use paper. So that is important. Interfaces with other data sources. It's something that people talk about in theory as being very easy, and actually when you start digging into the detail, it's really challenging. How do you know that this sprayer is the right sprayer on that farm? And I think that can be a challenge. And then also the accreditation framework that I talked about at the beginning. There are certain things that we still have to do and demonstrate to stay within that framework. But I think there's still a lot of opportunities. So where are we for the future? I think we have to, as I said, think outside the box. And, you know, we've said very much to our sector boards who've been brainstorming a lot of this stuff, don't just think about what we could change in the next 18 months. What do we want it to look like in 5 years' time? What could it look like in 10 years' time? This is about continuous change, but let's be aspirational in terms of where we want to go. Leveraging that data sharing. There's lots of other work going in other organisations. AHDB are obviously also doing that work. I know they've got a session tomorrow morning looking at that challenge, because the data is the farmer's data, and the farmer needs to have control over that data all of the time. Just one point, Red Tractor doesn't see and has no access to anything the farmer puts on the portal. It might be the Red Tractor portal, we can't access any of it. It's purely the assessor in order to make the verification of compliance easier. How can we use algorithms and AI and data to inform assessment type? So I talked about the assessment type being the same. Actually, let's start looking at farms differently. Let's start looking at farms of what type of assessment does a different farm need. You know, some farms might still need the traditional inspection and want the traditional inspection, but actually if we can verify compliance remotely, do you need a physical inspection at the same time? And that's something that's very much in all of our sector strategies to look at. And how can we automate the verification of compliance? That's what farm assurance is all about. It's verifying compliance with the standards. Traditionally, always been done by an inspector. Can that be done automatically without the farmer having the burden of being able to do that? But we also do need some, we need enabling factors to do that. And, we need to develop the trust with all parties in the supply chain and the farmers to enable us to do that. And I'm sure, as I said, that David and Phil will have more to say about this. But I just want to also leave with the final point that whatever model we come up with has to also be affordable. We can't have a cost model that means that all 40,000 farms are treated differently, because that will be incredibly costly. So it's somewhere between the balance that we need to keep the eye on that, and I'm sure farmers will keep us right on the whole cost side of things as well. So that was a bit of a whistle stop, but I also know I'm over time, so I'm going to hand over to Phil. Thank you.
I want to move that. Okay, good afternoon everybody. First thing to say is I need to get some new photographs, because that was taking a little while now. So we'll move quickly along. Thank you for that, Simon. Yeah, so APS Group. So I'm Phil Pearson. I'm Development Director for APS. We are the UK's largest tomato growers, 70 hectares of glass spread around the country. But I've been involved in all sorts of things, from a lot of work with DEFRA, UKRI, chairing research projects in all sorts of sectors I'll talk about in a minute, as well as looking for innovation from my own business. So quite a wide scope. I thought I'd put a couple of photographs up there. I'm not quite sure. Can I have a show of hands? Who's here? Is anybody here from horticulture? Agriculture? That's what I expected. Okay. Thank you. Right, okay. To give you an idea of what a commercial glasshouse looks like down without talking down to you, the top left-hand photograph there is a 3 hectare block of glass. I've just put some LED lights in for winter production, winter UK production. That glasshouse, to give you an idea of some of the numbers behind this, if you wanted to build that, you're talking circa £3 million a hectare. It's a massive amount of investment, plus another £1 million to put the lights in. So you are putting big numbers into this sector, so you need to get big returns. And big returns means efficiency in all sorts of sectors, and efficiency in our case means a lot of data. As Philippa said, a lot of information in our sector, a tremendous amount, terabytes daily. The reason for the photograph below, that's the same glass house in the daylight, but what it's showing there, I don't know if this button works, is it no? There's somewhere. Anyway, at the bottom left-hand photograph, the two stacks with the little bit of vapour coming out, that's combined heat and power. So our company has CHP, combined heat and power, on all our sites, which means that we use natural gas to turn an engine, CO2 in the glass house, waste heat is stored in that big tank on the bottom right-hand corner and then put in the glass house, and the power is exported to the local area. So very efficient from a climate change point of view, from a sustainability point of view. Again, lots of inputs. So I've mentioned about APS there. I'll just look at a couple of those headlines. We supply almost all the retailers in the UK, and to do that, we have a team where there's a commercial manager and a technical manager per customer. Our business has just over 2,400 people working within it, and there are hundreds in the management team alone. And imagine the data that's moving between that, between customers, buying products, 100 different SKUs, product type, 160 different product types. The numbers, the amount of technology, the amount of data that's whizzing around our business is insane. But the structure is very, very structured. It's very much a corporate business. When my grandfather started the business with one man. When I joined it, there was 12 of us, and I say there's 2,500 now. But you don't do that without having a corporate structure, and that structure, again, leads to data. And to make that point, because it leads on to the next points. So, been involved with Red Tractor from its inception. Very keen to work with both my customer and the Red Tractor team as we develop it. And looking back, as Philippa said, very different now to what it was in those days, and we've learnt a lot all together, but we have learnt and worked together. That's a big point I wanted to make. We use the standards as part of our production systems now. It's integrated completely. I can't imagine actually producing a crop without having the standard there. It's sort of how we operate. I'm on the fresh produce sector board, so I have a direct input into how the standard moves forward. I don't always get listened to, but I do make my point. And the schemes give us all the things that Philippa's already mentioned, so I won't copy it, repeat it, other than to say, that confidence word that our customers have and our consumers have is really critical. So we have to develop it and move this forward. And I think it's entrenched now in our systems anyway. And the other point to make is aligning with regulatory changes. And I'm going to also add the word policy changes, because one of the things I'm working on at the moment is to, at the beginning, work with precision-bred organisms. For our sector, there's a big opportunity here, both in automation and disease control and yield and flavour and through PBOs. But it won't happen if we don't bring the policymakers, retailers, the consumers, and the assured standards, Red Tractor, with us. So we're all working together to move it together. That's just an example of a policy change which is enormous, will affect all of us. Certainly a big impact on our sector that needs to happen at the same time. Environmental responsibility, those that you don't know, that little insect on the right-hand side is a bumblebee. It's a UK bumblebee that we use for pollination. The little insect there is bigger than the flower, so when it pollinates, it bruises the tip of the flower, so we know it's been pollinated before it's too late. Tremendous, one of the best workers we've got for certain now. Oops, somebody's buzzing in there. But those environmental standards and that stewardship, again, is built into the standards and is really, really critical. The point is, we were doing that before, but nobody knew we were doing it. So the standards are really important to make sure people know. But one of the things I also want to make here is that we've got all these different standards. You know, we align with LEAF and Soil Association because we do a lot of organic production. But we do all the different standards. And it's really important that we have a system, if you can think of anybody, Rob, that can help us with this, to bring those standards together in a way that works, to try and take some of the duplication out. I'm just conscious of time, so I won't take too much of David's time, but I will just want to cover a few other points. We are the critical link as the growers between the production and the consumer, and we take that very, very, very seriously. And I mentioned before about that communication to the consumer, and it's really critical, and the assurance schemes are absolutely key in that. It's embedded into our systems. Supply chain now, if any challenges, it goes straight back through, and it's very, very clear. And the next point I wanted to make, the next one doesn't matter, I'll cover it here. We have a system in our business called ITOM, which we've developed, which is our data gathering system. Everything we do, the whole management team can see the system on the phones, on the computers, and it covers everything from maintenance to spray records to harvesting yields to how much labour is used on that area, all the information you could possibly think of. And to give you an idea of some of the complexity, the glass houses that we have use computational fluid dynamic modelling control systems, which means that they control the environment using weather forecasting, using weather measurements, where the sensors all over the glass house, from CO2 to humidity. That technology just in that bit produces data every 4 seconds, which we record. So the amount of data we've got is enormous. I can't tell you how big it is. And that's all accessible to us all. What I want to do, looking forward, and again some of the points you made, Philippa, is to take the key bits of that data straight from our data point, straight into the portal. Not to be lazy, but to make sure that there's no gaps. So what's actually happening is actually delivered into the portal. And I think that's a really key point that I wanted to make. Not forgetting other sections like GRASP, etc. Looking after our people, absolutely critical. I've already told you, thousands of people work for us. Without people, nothing happens. I'll quickly tell you a story. My son has just returned from a 2-year secondment in the Canadian tomato industry. And over there are the glasshouse growers who are putting foundation posts in for glasshouses. They cannot build the glasshouse because they cannot get the people to work in the glasshouse. It's becoming a big problem around the world. We do have some ways to get around that, and the key answer to that is robotics. There's a gentleman in the room I'm working very closely with to find those solutions. We're making some tremendous progress. That's the next step. That will allow the industry then to grow again. We're definitely up against a brick wall at the moment. But we need to make sure that the production systems and the compliance is all linked together. It's all seamless. If you look back to the 2000 when we started, it wasn't seamless. You record over there. Now the other one was probably in that book on that shelf, I think. Now it's coming together, but there's another jump to go. And I think AI has a part to play in picking the data that's required in this data point, putting it in the next one. That was the issue. I just wanted to say this as well. Trust with our retail customers. They completely trust what we do. They completely trust the results of the audits that we take place in, and I actually lose track of how many audits. We've had an organic audit at one of our sites today. We have customer audits, and when we supply every retailer, you have an audit from every retailer. I think there's some opportunities here to bring some of that together, rather than doing the same thing 5 times. It isn't all about production, it's about the supply chain. The independent certification is critical. That security point to the consumer is really important. We're getting a little bit blasé about it now, for doing it over 25 years. That's what we do, and everybody knows about it. Just look back, it wasn't that long ago we started this. And that gives the consumer real confidence. And that gives the industry the real opportunity to sell at the right price. And I mentioned that bit about partnerships as well. That's really, really important. It's about working together. And my last point, you'll be pleased to hear, is that things are moving forwards. They need to move forwards. Key bits I want to do, I want to make sure that people embrace innovation, and I highlight there precision breeding and robotics. I think that's a key for my sector. That's the future. Without that, the sector's going to stall, because we can't produce the crop without either the machines or the people to pick it. But the standards need to evolve. They are evolving. But the system and the way that we measure the inputs has to evolve. The technology's out there. I can give you an example. We're developing a robot to pick tomatoes at the moment, that if that's the stem and there's a tomato vine behind here, the arm comes, where is it? Oh, it's there. The next time it sees it, it goes bang. Well, if a machine can teach itself to pick a tomato plant, the technology exists to take the data from point A and point B and point C and bring it to point D where it's visible to all. And I think we should be moving with that with all speed, because the technology is out there. It's possible to do. Sorry to put pressure on you there, Philippa, but I think that's definitely an opportunity. So, APS Group remains committed to adapting the systems, investing in the people, as it says there. Also, our focus remains on building a resilient, trusted, I'll say that word again, trusted supply chain for the future. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Phil, and good evening, everybody. And thank you very much for coming to this session. I live near Oxford, and I know how good the pubs and bars are. And after a long day in the conference, you've come here, so well done for that. And the other observation I had to make was that I think any speaker this morning of any calibre was accompanied by a cacophony of blaring horns. So I hope I've managed your expectation about what you're going to hear from me this evening. What I've been asked to do is just say a few words about our business, and then say a little bit about how farm assurance interacts with our business, and then make some observations about how it could improve going forward. So let's crack on and get to the Q&A, because that's where the real benefit lies. We are tenant dairy farmers. We farm about 10 miles to the west of here at a little village called Kingston Bagpues, and we have a couple of dairy units. This is our autumn calving herd, that's the herd out there, and we rent it from St John's College, which is about 400 metres in that direction. So that will tell you that we're tenant farmers on both our units, and about 97% of the land we farm is rented. We've bought a little bit in recent years. So an autumn calving herd there, about 600 cows, calving in about a 12-week block in the autumn months, milked through a 60-point rotary parlour, fairly conventional type system, winter housing, modern kennel type housing bedded on sand, winter feeding using a diet feeder and feed troughs, the whole herd run as one group. So trying to keep it simple and manageable for staff retention and just general ease of management. We have a second unit then that's about 15 miles south of here at a place called Lockinge. Anyone that's in the point-to-point world will know of Lockinge point-to-point on Easter Monday. We now farm the car park where you park your cars on the bank, and we now actually farm the bit of grass in the middle of the racetrack. And I said to our joint venture partner who runs this, for God's sake, don't have any misses in that field, because everybody looks down on that field, and the grief you'll get as a farmer if you screw that up will be horrendous. It's run as a joint venture. So we have a young couple that have come in from outside farming and run that with us, and they're responsible for all the day-to-day management of that, including a lot of the farm assurance stuff. So we installed the whole grazing infrastructure using railway sleepers. We started off with the existing parlour and then upgraded to a more modern herringbone parlour. We outwinter cows. And then both units will rear their own heifer replacements. I run a crossbred herd, so black and white, Scandinavian red and brown Swiss. Chris would run a slightly more Friesian-y type herd on the joint venture. And then we're into beef as well, partly because of TB management, but also more lately of a profit opportunity too. So we've at any one time we'll have somewhere around 2,000, 2,200 cattle between those two farms and farms around us. And that works very well for us. With tenant dairy and beef farmers, we have a tiny diversification that we started in COVID. I hesitate to call it a business. because it is an abject lesson in capital destruction, okay? But park that for a moment. We have so much fun. My wife makes fantastic ice cream, and what it does do, it gets you meeting the end consumer because you're putting a product in their hand. And that's really valuable, actually, because my milk is collected at 2 a.m., and I never see the tanker driver. Now, thankfully, I'm involved with Arla, so I get close to the consumer, and Tesco et al. But on this, you have the conversation directly, and that's really valuable. And I'll come back to that very briefly in terms of assurance in a moment or two. Let's just talk about assurance in our world and how it interacts with us. So this is the Autumn Calving Farm, Kingston Hill Farm, the one that's 10 miles away. So we have red tractor, excuse me, broadly every 18 months. We then have Arla's equivalent, which is called Arla Garden, a data submission every 6 months, followed up by a risk-based audit, so probably every 3 years, unless the numbers are going awry, when we might get visited more frequently. We have to do farm ahead for Arla. That's Arla's climate check. So this is a carbon footprint. So I have to do an annual data submission of all the stuff that any type carbon footprint you would have to do, and that's annually that we do that. We then have the sustainability incentive model for Arla. So this is what's trying to drive down our carbon footprint and improve our efficiency. So I have to put a degree of information in to justify what I'm doing. Good examples would be that I get points for using deforestation-free soya. So I then have to justify that by showing the feed ticket that it's come from the right sources. Another example would be that we would be using 100% renewable electricity. So again, the electricity contract, I have to submit that to justify that and get those points. And those points then mean I get a slightly higher milk price as a result. And then finally, Tesco, quarterly data submission and inspection combined with red tractor. And Philippa's already touched on that, and I'll come back to that in a minute. If you turn to the spring unit then, red tractor again every 18 months, at the same time scales. The only difference is we supply Aldi at the spring unit, and so we have quarterly data submission for them, and we have an annual inspection, excuse me, stroke advisory visit from Aldi, which Map of Ag facilitate and make happen. So that's the difference. So that's quite a complicated world, although some of those are together, they are combined. But there's quite a lot of assurance stuff that I have to deal with on a regular basis. So thoughts on the current system? Well, I think my first observation is I think these are hugely important, these schemes. They're not universally popular sometimes with farmers, but I think I heard a phrase this week about the UK, and it came from Sean Rickard, the economist, and I've not heard it before, and it was food credence, or food credibility. And the observation he made was that we've got really good food credibility in the UK. And as the middle classes of the world grow, they're going to take a great deal more interest in their food credibility. And actually we heard it today in the conference on a number of occasions. And they're going to take more interest in how it's produced and where it comes from and stuff like that. And thus we need something standing behind that to justify those standards, to justify the claims. We're good in the UK. We sometimes think we're the best. I don't think we are the best always, but we're certainly up there. But we need something to justify it and demonstrate it. It's also about brand protection. Certainly for Tesco and for Arla, it's about that brand. And even with Red Tractor, it's about that UK brand, isn't it? It is justifying that. And I think that's hugely important. We've heard some stuff recently, and particularly from some of the polarised sources, about getting rid of farm assurance or doing without inspections. And I just don't think that is going to cut it. I think we've got to get smarter at doing it, and I'll come on to that in a minute or two. But we are never going to compete on a commodity level. Again, we've heard that today. So I think what we've got to do is recognise that we are quality producers and then have the data behind it to justify and back that up. And that for me is fundamental. Now, we use a whole range of portals for this data entry, and I was asked to say a word or two about those. We use the Red Tractor one. If I'm honest, and forgive me for what I'm about to say, I find the Red Tractor one slightly clunky. It's not too bad. It kind of feels, and this might have come out today, like it was developed in a hurry. And the COVID bit might have been, that might be your excuse, Philippa, all right? But I find it slightly clunky to use. But hey, I'm not going to die in a ditch over it. The The Arla ones and the Tesco ones are really good. I have to confess I don't do the Aldi one because I said to my joint venture partner, I am sick of farm assurance. If you want to do the Aldi stuff, you can do the filling in of that because I've got quite enough burden on me. So I can't comment a great deal about the Aldi stuff, which is map of ags. But certainly the Arla and the Tesco ones are really good. They're intuitive, they're helpful, and I can get the data uploaded pretty sharpish. So they're manageable, but still have untapped potential, I think. So let's just wrap up with some thoughts for the future then. And a lot of this has already been covered, but I think, the line that was used yesterday in one of the opening sessions in the opportunities session, the most exhausting part of farming today is not the farming, it's the paperwork. How appropriate. How many nodding heads have we got around yesterday and again today? So this duplication bit drives us up the wall as farmers, and we've got to get better at stopping this. It just... I've written Louise down here. Louise Manning mentioned it today too, didn't she, as well, in her piece, about the importance of stopping that. Combining inspections wherever possible. And I have to say, hats off to Tesco and Red Tractor for this, for getting that together, because I used to have a separate Red Tractor inspection, and then annually Tesco would come. And so much of it was overlapping, it was bonkers. So the fact that we've managed to put it together is a great result, and should show the way for the future opportunities in doing that. Right, slight rant coming now, Food Standards Agency. I'm not going to embarrass anybody in the room to ask if they're from the Food Standards Agency, but why, oh why, do I have to have a dairy hygiene inspection once every 10 years nowadays, when they come down the farm drive to look at the milking parlour for 20 minutes and turn around and go away? What is all that about, government? Every 18 months I've got Red Tractor, I've got Arla coming every 3 years, risk-based in between. Why, if you're serious about saving cost, come on guys, sharpen up, that one can go. All right, rant over, thank you for that. We've talked about only entering data once, but better for me is automatic data collection. And I think we've got to get much, much smarter about this. So there's lots of opportunities, and we're starting to get it together. So for instance, now in my world, which portal is it? One of the portals will go and pick up BCMS data. BCMS, for anyone that doesn't know, is the National Cattle Database. So it can go off and go and pick up how many births, how many deaths, how many movements I've had over the course of the year, and automatically populate the system. We could use that with Uniform Agri. That's the herd management software that a lot of us use now. That could be automated. So many of us have got, not me, but so many of us have got robots now. There's a massive data in those robots that could be picked up. And there was one other I was going to mention. That's right, National Milk Records, whether you use NMR or CIS, that's the organisations you use to record all that herd data. We could pick that up automatically as well. And I think there's a great opportunity there to go and get that. And in the future, things like locomotion scores from cameras as well. Aligning measures. It drives me mad when I am having to assess animals with a different scale for a different organisation. So for Red Tractor, I use or for Tesco and or locomotion scoring, I use the Red Tractor. For Arla Garden, I have to use a different scale. I mean, how bloody bonkers is this? Can we not get that together as well? So wherever possible, can we not align measures? Inspection versus advisory visit. Going back to the ice cream business, and the reason I put it in, my wife is very fastidious in the way she works. She won't let me anywhere near her ice cream, which is probably just as well. And when she got set up, she was due in a visit from the environmental health. And she was really worried about this. And the visit came and went, and my wife and the inspector then went off to our farmhouse kitchen, and I thought, I don't know how this is going. Anyway, I went in the house later on and I said, come on, how did it go? And she said, it was absolutely fantastic. She said, because not only was it an audit, but it was a really helpful advisory type visit. And they came with all sorts of advice, constructive advice, pointers to go to get further information. And she said, I now actually really look forward to them coming again. So there's a template for me about what an inspection could be like if we get the model right. Clearly, we've got to do that assessment bit. You need that compliance. I need that stick to make it happen sometimes, frankly. But at the same time, we could get so much, much more out of it. Potential for improvement via data. I think there's a great opportunity. I've touched on it already. We're doing that in the farmer head stuff for Arla. That's the climate check. There's a real opportunity there. I can compare myself with a whole host of different farms, and I can change the groupings. So I can look at autumn calves, spring calves, calving herds. I can look at myself in the UK. I can compare myself to my European colleagues in Arla. So there's an opportunity for looking at the data to do some benchmarking and comparing how I'm getting on. Whose data is it? We've touched on that. It's fundamental to me. It's our data. It's quite simple. It is our data, and we must make sure there are good tram lines and rules around what happens with that data once it leaves the farm. But I don't think that is insurmountable. Data security, equally that is of crucial importance, but I don't think we should overplay it. I asked, and I'm not going to tell you which one it was, but I asked one of the organisations I'm involved with about how secure we felt about our IT after the M&S stuff last autumn. And the answer came back was, it's not if we get hacked, it's when we get hacked. And it's how we recover from it that we are focusing on. So frankly, we're going to get hacked, and the likes of Red Tractor will get hacked in the future. It will happen. So I don't think he should put us off, but I think we need to be aware of it, because I think we're a soft target, frankly, and we've seen it happen in agriculture to various organisations. NMR have already been hacked once, Mole Valley have been, and I suspect others have that we don't know about. And final comment is, try to minimise change in these portals. We as farmers hate change. You get used to a system, you get used to data input. Nothing gives you more fear when you go to log on again and the whole thing has changed. And you sit there, oh, I've got to re-navigate my way through it. Now, clearly, things change, and they need to change. I accept that. But my point is, try not to change it any more frequently than we absolutely need to. So that was a whiz through Farm Assurance and Kingston Hill Farm. I hope that's been of some help in terms of setting some context. Clearly, I'm going to take some questions now, but I'll also hang around afterwards should anybody want to pick up anything one-to-one. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much. We've got just over 10 minutes now, so I'd like to invite all three speakers back onto the stage, and we'll open the floor up to some questions. If, when you're asking your questions, if you just say your name and where you're from, that'd be great. And if your question's for a very specific speaker as well, just let them know as well in the question. So we'll start. We've got roaming mics on the floor. Yes, we've got one there. We've got a question right at the back by the door.
Hi there, everyone. Can you hear me? Yeah. Joe from Asda, supermarket, actually. One of the things I'm really interested in, I suppose, is there's a lot of touch points around data within audit process, a lot of touch points about burden for data entry. And then outside of this, we've also got aspects of data that's needed for other purposes, whether that's reporting into customers or, you know, for fulfilling kind of like different environmental, you know, demands or benefits, potentially even into, you know, elements of public sector reporting. And I'm kind of interested in this dynamic of, within the Red Tractor review process, it's like, is there an opportunity or a role within the audit process to add value back for farmers in terms of data collation and data entry? And if there is, where might you see those kind of like opportunities?
Oh, we're live. We're live.
Yeah,
I think it's a huge opportunity. I think the challenge for these guys is probably cost in making it happen and stuff like that. But anything where the data gets together gives you that opportunity for improvement, and I think it's invaluable. And my parallel is with that farmer head stuff for Arla, that ability to then compare myself against others and then look at where I'm weak and improve. So for me, I haven't got a great deal more to say than that, other than I completely agree, and frankly, the sooner we can get on with it, the better.
At a point. I was very clear that data is really important, and the more we share the data, the more we help each other. The only caveat I would add is that we need to be careful around competition. In my sector, there's 25 growers in the UK that do what I do. That's all. We'll watch each other very, 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 very closely, obviously, at the commercial end, but at the production side, we're very helpful to each other because what we're competing with is imports. So there are opportunities on the production side to definitely share data and do it in real time, because I think everybody wins, including all the way through the supply chain, through yourselves to the consumer.
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah, I think the only other thing that I would add is, from a Red Tractor perspective, of course, it's the majority is nearly the entire sector. So we would do whatever the industry felt there was an opportunity for Red Tractor to help and support, but we also need to be mindful that people compete, companies are competing with each other, so we've got to find the right balance there.
Just on that, I guess some of the themes from you, Phil, and David talking was automation and getting data flowing, but then I think one of you mentioned how that is challenging as well to sort of encourage people to automatically share data, because I can imagine from running a farming business perspective you might see risks with that. Would you see sort of actually getting the value back from benchmarking reports and everything to as part of like the incentive almost to maybe be more willing to share data in a more live manner?
Absolutely. I'll give you an example. When I first started in the industry, that's why I got this white hair, we used to do, the numbers don't really matter, 100 tonnes to the acre. We're doing 300 tonnes to the acre now. And the difference is innovation and working together as growers to do that. And I think we need to take that into other areas, whether that's recording our carbon emissions, looking at sustainability, looking at food safety, all these points that are common to us all but are not commercial. I think that would be a starting point, and I think we could do that really easily. And certainly in my sector, the data's on a computer already. It's getting it from the various different systems, whether it's Excel, in our case it's a data system, and without exploding the Red Tractor computer in the process.
So 4 or 5 years ago, I was involved in a project with a McKinsey guy who'd got this bit of hardware that had come out of the mining industry. And the idea was that you'd plug your telecom feeds into it and it would intercept the data coming back into your farm and then send it off, and it would be able to break down and marry all the data up. Needless to say, it didn't work. It still sat on my milking parlour office wall. The plugs are out, I promise you. And the system morphed into Trinity Natural Capital, and I'm not quite sure how that's going, frankly. But the concept I thought was really useful. Can we automate this data collection, and can we break the silos so that we can then do analysis of data that we might not have been able to compare? But for me, it's about ease of data collection in the first place that we've got to get right.
Thanks. And I think the only thing I would add, going back to Joe's point, is that during Red Tractor, the auditors don't collect data. That doesn't happen during an audit. They verify the processes that are in place on the farm. So, I think we're not talking about auditors collecting data. That's not going to be an efficient way anyway. It's about automating who needs the data.
There's a couple hands up. I think there's one just second row from back there. Meg.
Good afternoon. Ali Jones, President NFU Cymru. This has been a particularly inspiring session, and the fact that nearly all seats are taken is credit, really, and your presentations, I say, deserves a huge amount of appreciation. I think the understanding of data is obviously growing throughout the industry. Can I say just particularly on my own aspect of developing the sustainable farming scheme back home in Wales. A lot of that was predicated on the value of data and making sure that the SFS really drove that appreciation, because authenticating our credentials is something that is presented to us as an opportunity. Now, obviously, the Farm Assurance Review was very strongly advising not to duplicate actions or data input. Now, one of the data inputs that we have in the sustainable farming scheme is the animal health improvement cycle. There is not an overlap, unfortunately, thus far on the AHIC and farm assurance processes, Red Tractor or fowl in our case in Wales. Now, David Llewellyn would say very strongly, they need to morph, they need to come together. Because ultimately farmers are asking for it, but never take away the opportunity that we do have, because every one of you has said really this is the opportunity that we must grasp and take away inefficiencies, and drive the ambitions that we have, because there are plenty of others globally that would take our market away if they want, and that we have, and I think we should appreciate and drive this approach. Those who are fearful regarding where the data goes, we need to protect the data. Yes, okay. But never take it as an excuse not to use the data for our own benefits.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Alan. And I think, thank you very much. One of the points that you make around government policies and where government policy is taking versus how that aligns with assurance. Absolutely, we need to make sure that they are aligned. And from an assurance scheme perspective, speaking on behalf of all assurance schemes, we would absolutely embrace working with governments to make sure that that happens. I think David Llewellyn, the Farm Assurance Review, did give some recommendations with actions at government, and the interim report from David Llewellyn has identified that at the moment the government agencies haven't embraced and engaged in that discussion. And I think as assurance schemes, we're doing all that we can to try and encourage that conversation. So it is a bit of a challenge. Although having said that, in Wales, I do believe the Welsh Government has just appointed somebody to lead liaison with farm assurance schemes, but none of the other governments have yet.
So I think what the crux here is giving confidence to farmers about where that data goes and how it's used. And for me, if I'm going to adopt something or get comfortable with something, the most effective route for me to do that is to get it into the hands of a farmer that I look up to. And if it gets into the hands of someone that I go, he's a really good farmer, if it's good enough for him, it's good enough for me. So those are the advocates of this system. So if you can get the data working and you can get them advocating the benefits of this collective data, that's the best way to sell this, I think.
I'm just very conscious of time. There's a couple more hands I've seen. There's one just down here, Meg, and I'll do one more question after that, and then we'll just have a look at the time, and if people want to leave after that, they can, but we'll hang around in case people want to carry on once we're finished.
Thanks. Phil Stocker from the National Sheep Association. Again, I'd like to say what an excellent session this has been. It's been really informative and very positive and forward-looking too. Great. I'd also like to just commend Red Tractor for the work that you've done since the review, because I think, again, it's very positive. I think you've listened. You're working very closely with industry to try to improve things, so that's really good. I just want to come back on one of the comments you made, Philippa, about, and I can understand this, the need for systems across the sector groups to be. I'm also on the Beef and Lamb Red Tractor board, I should add as well. But the comment you made about the sectors to have the same approach, a similar approach, you can have lots of different approaches for different sectors. Our sector in the sheep industry is very different to the dairy and the horticulture. A very high proportion of really small family farms, a very high proportion of single operators where there's just one person that is managing a flock of sheep, quite often not even on their own farm, on someone else's farm. It's a very, very difficult sector, recognised as hard to reach, I guess. I'd hate to think that we were holding back the innovation that we've heard from Phil and David. I'd really hate to think we were, because I think we will learn from that in the future. But I suppose what is the balance? How do we cater for sectors that are very, very different and allow some of the progress that we've heard of today without alienating some of the harder to reach sectors?
Phil, it's a really good point, and there's a number of people who have said, stop pushing the portal, it's not relevant to our farmers. And that's why I made the point about whatever solution we come up with has got to be, there needs to be a wide number of solutions for different farmers in different scenarios, and by the sector as well. And I was listening to Phil thinking, gosh, actually, and I knew Phil, you were in the room thinking, gosh, if there were sheep farmers in this room, what are they thinking to this conversation? So that is the challenge we have as Red Tractor. We need to provide a broad range of services and systems that are applicable to a broad range of different types of farmers. And we are absolutely up for doing that, but I think just to my point around, we still have to keep an eye on the cost model. But there is an opportunity to do it. And I think what I was also thinking, particularly while Phil and David were speaking, was actually, could Red Tractor help facilitate that cross-pollination of knowledge across sectors? Because actually, I think if we brought some of our sector boards together to learn from each other. So I think there are things going on in the poultry and pig sector that would be really interesting. And when we talk about AI, the use of cameras where AI can spot if there are welfare issues. so it's not all down to people. You know, things like that. I think sectors have a lot to learn from each other, but we also have to be mindful of those farmers who, you know, can't embrace technology for one reason or another.
I think it's a salutary reminder. Forgive me for what I'm about to say. I think you're old enough, Phil, to remember the fiendishly difficult beef special premium schemes and suckler cow premium schemes of the probably 90s, I think, when I came out of Newcastle. And those forms were bloody awful. And I used to look at those and think, I don't know how some of these guys fill these in, but they found a way around it. Usually the markets help them. I have a dear friend that I was at Newcastle with. She set up a fantastic business. She's a Cumbrian farmer's wife. She set up a fantastic little business helping other farmers with exactly that sort of paperwork. So I think these guys will find a way. As much as possible, I think the challenge for these guys is that it doesn't become a consultant's charter or a secretary's charter, because it puts more cost in, and that's what we've got to watch. But you're both right. We can't afford to let it hold us back. We've just got to find a way to take them with us.
One very quick addition to that. I agree with what both panellists have just said. I think there's a halfway house, I think, Phil, isn't there? We haven't had smartphones for very long, have we, in real terms? But we all use them, and we're used to pushing buttons and having apps. I think there's a way to say, actually, do you know what? You can use a part of the portal for that to start with, and the bits you're not comfortable with, use it as paper. I know that's giving you a challenge, Philippa, but I think we've just got to phase it out, haven't we? I think that's the only way to do it sensibly.
And just to add to that, absolutely. So when a farmer uses the portal, we don't say it's all or nothing. They could, if they want, just upload one document if they wanted to. And that's why actually we're doing this piece of work about what are the really key documents that will have the biggest impact on the audit. It might be that in the sheep sector, that's only 3 or 4. And that's the starting point versus the all singing, all dancing, everything fully integrated.
Brilliant. I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there because we are out of time, but as I said before, we'll just hang around at the front, so if anyone's got any questions to ask the speakers that haven't managed to ask, please come across. Otherwise, I'd just like to have a final round of applause for the 3 speakers.